I heard a man laughing in my bedroom. My wife lied instantly. I'm a 56-year-old man, and even saying that out loud feels strange now, because age hits different after the night your reality cracks right down the middle. And some nights still drag me awake like it all just happened an hour ago. My heart racing, my chest tight, my mind replaying a sound I can never unhear. Because once you hear another man laughing inside your own bedroom, the place that's supposed to be your safest corner of the world, your life never goes back to what it was before. That night didn't come with warning signs or dramatic storms or bad feelings in my gut. It came wrapped in normal, boring routine. The kind of evening I had grown to love over the years because boring meant nothing was wrong. I had stayed late at my small construction consulting office, the same office I built from scratch after years of breaking my back for other people. And by the time I shut the lights off and locked the door, my shoulders were stiff, my knees hurt. My hands were dry and rough, and all I wanted was to go home, eat whatever Linda had cooked, maybe watch a little TV, and sit in that quiet that comes when you think your life, while not exciting, is at least steady. The drive home was uneventful, radio low, traffic light, my mind drifting between tomorrow's work and whether I should finally fix the loose step on the porch this weekend. And I remember thinking how lucky I was that my life didn't have drama anymore. How at my age peace mattered more than passion, more than excitement, more than anything else. When I turned onto our street and pulled into the driveway, the first small thing felt off, but I didn't know it yet because the house lights were all on, upstairs and downstairs, glowing bright against the dark. And that was strange because Linda usually kept the house dim in the evenings, saying bright lights made her anxious, saying she liked the calm feeling of shadows and lamps. And I even smiled to myself, thinking maybe she was in a good mood. Maybe she wanted the place to feel warm when I walked in. I grabbed my bag, shut the car door and walked up to the front door without a single bad thought in my head, unlocked it, stepped inside, and that's when my entire world shifted in 1 second flat. I heard a man laugh. Not a TV laugh, not canned noise, not something distant or muffled, but a real man's laugh, deep and relaxed and comfortable, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who feels completely at home. It came from upstairs. It came from my bedroom. My body reacted before my brain did, because I stopped dead in the hallway like my boots were nailed to the floor, my breath catching halfway in, my heart giving one hard thump like it was warning me. For a few seconds I didn't move at all, and my mind did what minds do when the truth is too big to handle. It tried to protect me by lying. I told myself it had to be the TV, maybe Linda left something playing upstairs, maybe I was overtired, maybe my ears were playing tricks on me. I stood there listening, almost begging the house to prove me wrong, and then I heard it again, louder this time, followed by my wife's voice, soft and playful, with a tone I hadn't heard in years, a lightness that used to be reserved just for me back when we were younger, back when love felt easy. That sound went straight through me, and my heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, my hands going cold, my mouth drying up like I had swallowed sand, and for a split second I honestly thought I might pass out right there in the hallway of my own home. I remember gripping the strap of my bag just to ground myself, just to feel something solid, and then I started walking toward the stairs, slow at first, like my legs weren't sure they wanted to carry me any closer to the truth. Every step felt heavier than the last, like gravity had doubled, and the whole time my mind was screaming questions I was too scared to ask, questions that didn't have answers I wanted to hear. Halfway up the stairs, my chest felt tight, my ears were ringing, and I remember thinking how unfair it was that after everything I had given to this house, after all the years I had spent working late, missing vacations, fixing problems without complaining, this was the moment my life chose to fall apart. I hadn't even reached the bedroom door when it swung open suddenly, and there was Linda, standing there like she had been waiting for me, her face pale, her eyes wide, her hair slightly out of place. And in that moment I didn't see my wife, I saw a stranger wearing her face. Before I could say a word, before I could ask a question, before I could even process what I was seeing, she spoke my name quickly, too quickly, and started talking in that forced calm voice people use when they're panicking inside, telling me I was mistaken, telling me she had been watching something funny on her phone, telling me she dropped it when she heard the door, telling me I must have imagined the laughter because I was tired. And the thing that shattered me more than anything else wasn't the excuse itself. It was how fast it came, how smooth it sounded, how ready she was to lie without hesitation. I just stood there staring at her, taking in every detail I had ignored for years. The way she wouldn't look directly at me, the way her hands trembled slightly, the way her body angled itself to block the bedroom behind her. And I felt something inside my chest crack open, not explode, but split slowly and painfully. In that moment, without proof, without seeing another man's face, without hearing a confession, I knew with a certainty that scared me how long this must have been going on, how practiced she was at hiding it, how foolish I had been to believe love alone could protect a marriage. I didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't shove past her, because shock has a way of draining all the energy out of you. And all I could think was how this was the same woman who used to wait up for me when I worked late, the same woman who once cried when I was 5 minutes late coming home, because she worried something had happened to me. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come crashing in like a storm. Sometimes it stands right in front of you, lying calmly, wearing the face of the person you trusted most. And in that silent hallway, with my wife's lie hanging in the air between us, I understood that nothing in my life would ever feel safe in the same way again. Linda stood there blocking the bedroom door like a scared kid caught stealing, her body stiff, her shoulders tense, her eyes darting around like she was searching for the fastest exit. And before I could even open my mouth or form a single question, she said my name in that forced calm voice I had heard her use only a few times before, the kind of voice people use when they are trying to slow down a disaster already in motion. She told me I was imagining things, told me I must be exhausted from work, told me she had been watching a comedy show on her phone and laughing alone, and then added quickly that she had dropped it when she heard me come in. Every word poured out of her in a rush, like she was reading from a script she had practiced in her head, and none of it sounded right, none of it matched the reality still ringing in my ears. I didn't interrupt her, didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse her of anything, because shock has a strange way of making you quiet, and in that moment I felt like I was watching my own life from a distance. I just stood there looking at her face, really looking for the first time in years, noticing the small details that suddenly mattered, the way her hands were shaking even though the house was warm, the way she kept swallowing hard like her throat was dry, the way she couldn't hold my gaze for more than a second before looking away. Those details told me more than her words ever could, and that's when I felt something heavy settle in my chest, a deep understanding that whatever we used to have, whatever I thought our marriage still was, something inside it had already died before I ever walked through that front door. I asked her one simple question, the kind of question that gives someone a chance to tell the truth even when it's painful, and I asked it calmly, without anger, without sarcasm, just wanting honesty, asking who was upstairs with you. She snapped back instantly, not confused, not surprised, but defensive, saying no one, saying I was tired, saying I was being ridiculous, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that reaction hurt more than the laughter itself ever could. Because in that moment, she wasn't just lying, she was insulting my intelligence, choosing disrespect over honesty, choosing to make me feel small instead of owning what she had done. I felt my stomach drop as I realized she believed I would accept whatever explanation she gave me, that she thought our years together had trained me to swallow discomfort just to keep the peace. I walked past her anyway, gently but firmly, and opened the bedroom door, and the room told its own story without saying a word. The window was cracked open even though it was cold outside. The curtains were slightly moved like someone had brushed past them in a hurry, and there was a strange smell in the air that didn't belong to me, a scent that didn't match the familiar comfort of our shared space. The bed looked disturbed, not messy, Not chaotic, just wrong, like something had been interrupted and rushed to hide, like someone had been there who didn't belong and left in a hurry. I stood there taking it all in, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief, while Linda followed me into the room, still talking, still explaining, still layering lie on top of lie, trying to control the story the way she always had, hoping if she talked long enough, I would stop thinking. That's when it truly hit me that she thought I was weak enough to accept whatever nonsense she fed me, that she believed my loyalty meant blindness, that my calm meant ignorance. I didn't argue with her, didn't demand answers because something inside me had shifted, and I knew this wasn't a conversation that would bring truth. It was a performance meant to protect her comfort at my expense. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the edge of the bed with my back to her, staring at the wall as the hours passed, listening to her breathing behind me, steady and calm, like nothing in the world had changed, while my mind replayed every detail over and over again. I wondered how long she had been laughing behind my back, how many nights she had smiled at someone else while I worked late thinking I was providing for a family that no longer respected me. The house felt unfamiliar, the silence felt heavy, and in the darkness, I realized that the lie itself wasn't the deepest wound. It was the ease with which she told it, the comfort she had with betraying me, and that understanding hurt in a way I wasn't sure would ever fully heal. Over the next few weeks after that night, I became someone I barely recognized. Not because I changed on the outside, but because something inside me went quiet in a way it never had before. I stopped asking questions out loud, stopped trying to talk things through, stopped pretending that normal conversations still meant what they used to mean, and instead I started watching quietly, listening carefully, and paying attention to the details I had ignored for years. There is a strange shift that happens when trust breaks, because suddenly every small action feels louder, every silence feels heavy, and every explanation feels rehearsed. I noticed how Linda guarded her phone like it held her life inside it, how it never left her hand, how she took it with her even when she went to another room for a few seconds, and how she would tilt the screen away from me instinctively, not even realizing she was doing it. I noticed how she suddenly had errands at odd hours, quick trips that didn't make sense, sudden plans that appeared out of nowhere, and how she started dressing differently for things that didn't require effort, putting on a smile that didn't feel meant for me. I watched how she reacted to notifications, how her face would soften or brighten when a message came in, and how she would quickly lock the screen if I happened to walk by, offering casual explanations that felt thin and hollow. Each of these things on their own could have been innocent, but together they painted a picture I didn't want to see, a picture my heart tried to reject even as my mind began to accept it. I lived in that space between knowing and denying, going through the motions of daily life while carrying a knot in my stomach that never loosened. One afternoon, when Linda rushed out to meet a friend and left her tablet sitting on the kitchen counter, it buzzed with a notification that stopped me cold. I wasn't snooping, wasn't searching for proof. I was just standing there when the screen lit up with a message preview that froze my blood in an instant. It wasn't graphic, wasn't explicit, wasn't anything that could be dismissed as a mistake, and that's what made it so devastating. It was familiar, comfortable, intimate in a way that only comes from repeated connection. A man thanking her for last night and saying he couldn't stop laughing thinking about it. My hands started shaking as I picked up the tablet, my heart pounding in my ears, my mouth going dry, and for a moment I just stared at the screen, hoping I had misunderstood, hoping context would somehow save me. But as I unlocked it and scrolled, the truth unfolded slowly and painfully in front of me. There were months of messages, long threads filled with inside jokes, shared frustrations, casual affection, and moments of emotional closeness that belonged in a marriage, not in secret conversations with someone else. I saw complaints about me, about my work hours, about my quiet nature, about how predictable I had become, and each word felt like a small cut, because these were things she never brought to me, never gave me the chance to address or understand. I saw plans being made while I was at work, while I was sitting in traffic, while I was tired and proud of myself for providing, and the realization that my absence had been filled by someone else hit me harder than any insult ever could. The man's name was Eric, and learning about him felt like learning about a stranger who had somehow been living in my life without my knowledge. He was in his early 40s, recently divorced, worked in sales, and from what I could piece together, he had confidence, time, and attention to give, things I had unknowingly been competing against. He was someone Linda met at a local gym, the same gym I encouraged her to join because I wanted her to feel good about herself, to have something for her, never imagining that my support would open the door to my own humiliation. The betrayal didn't come as an explosion or a dramatic breakdown. It came as a slow, crushing weight settling in my chest, making it hard to breathe, making it hard to think, making it hard to accept that the life I thought I knew had been quietly rewritten without my consent. I didn't confront her right away, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to understand how deep this went, how long it had been happening, how much of my life had already been taken from me without my knowledge. I needed to see the full picture before making any move, because reacting in anger would only give her control of the narrative. That's when something inside me hardened, not into bitterness, but into resolve. And I decided that if she believed I was foolish enough to be lied to, then I would be smart enough to let her keep believing it, at least until I understood exactly what I was dealing with and how I wanted my own story to end. I played my role perfectly, not because I enjoyed pretending, but because pretending was the only way I could survive those days without breaking apart in front of the very person who had caused the damage. I acted tired, distant, distracted, the way a man looks when life has slowly worn him down, and Linda accepted that version of me easily because it fit the story she needed to believe. I let her think her lies were working, let her believe I was too exhausted, too checked out, too wrapped up in my own routine to notice what was really happening right under my roof. I nodded when she talked, responded with short answers and avoided arguments, not because I agreed with her, but because I was done wasting energy on conversations that led nowhere. Inside, though, something very different was happening. While she thought she was managing the situation, I was quietly rebuilding myself piece by piece, like a man gathering tools in the dark before dawn. I spent long hours alone thinking, replaying conversations from the past, recognizing patterns I had ignored, and slowly understanding how much of myself I had given away over the years in the name of keeping peace. I realized how often I had chosen silence over honesty, how many times I had swallowed frustration because I believed being a good husband meant putting my own needs last, and that realization hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. I met with a lawyer quietly, choosing someone recommended by a friend who knew how to listen more than he talked, and sitting in that office felt strange, like I was stepping into a version of my future I never planned for. I asked questions calmly, took notes, and learned what options looked like for a man my age. And instead of fear, I felt clarity for the first time since that night on the stairs. I gathered financial records slowly and carefully, statements, documents, things I had handled for years without thinking, now seeing them through a different lens, realizing how much responsibility I had carried without acknowledgement. I documented everything without her knowing, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because I had learned the hard way that trust without proof leaves you vulnerable. As I dug through the details of our shared life, I learned things about my own marriage that shocked me, including how much I had sacrificed without ever being appreciated, how often my efforts had been expected rather than valued, and how easy it had been for my consistency to become invisible. Linda grew bolder as time passed, almost careless, as if my calmness convinced her that I was defeated or unaware. She stopped hiding her phone as much, stopped rushing to explain herself, and started criticizing me openly in ways she never had before, pointing out my flaws, my habits, my age, like she needed to turn me into the villain in her mind to justify what she was doing. There were moments when her words stung, when old instincts pushed me to defend myself, but the more she pushed, the calmer I became, because I had learned something important in that silence. There's a strange power that comes when you stop begging for love and start respecting yourself instead, when you realize that dignity doesn't need to be loud to be strong. I didn't want revenge that would make me look small or angry or desperate, because I had lived too long to reduce myself to that. What I wanted was justice, the kind that doesn't rely on shouting or insults, the kind that lets the truth speak for itself and leaves no room for denial. I wanted the truth to be undeniable, not just to her, but to myself, and I wanted her to feel the full weight of her choices without me ever raising my voice, because sometimes the quiet response is the one that echoes the longest. The opportunity didn't come wrapped in drama or suspicion. It arrived disguised as another one of Linda's casual plans, the kind she had grown comfortable making without checking in with me anymore. And when she told me she was going on a weekend retreat with friends, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, even as I smiled and nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. I helped her pack without hesitation, folded her clothes neatly, asked the right questions, and wished her a good time, playing the role of the supportive husband so well that even I almost believed it for a moment. What she didn't know was that I already knew Eric would be there, not because I followed her or spied on her, but because the truth has a way of revealing itself when you stop looking away. I had seen enough messages, enough hints, enough careless slips to understand that this trip wasn't about relaxation or friendship. It was about escape. And I decided then that I wouldn't chase her or confront her or beg for answers that would only come wrapped in more lies. Instead, I chose something better, something quieter and far more powerful. While she was gone, I planned carefully, not in anger, not in desperation, but with a calm clarity that surprised even me. I scheduled a family gathering at our house for the following week, something we hadn't done in a long time, and I invited our kids, her sister, and a few close friends who had been part of our lives for years, people who knew us as a couple, people who believed in the image we had presented to the world. When I told Linda about it after she returned, I kept my tone light, told her I thought it would be good for us, good to reconnect, good to remind ourselves of what mattered, and she agreed without hesitation, confident and careless, probably assuming it would be just another performance she could get through with a smile. In the days leading up to it, I prepared everything calmly, moving through the house with a steady focus, arranging chairs, cleaning rooms, making sure the space looked warm and welcoming, because I wanted no distractions, no excuses, no way for the truth to be hidden behind chaos. I didn't plan humiliation, because humiliating someone in anger only reflects back on you, and I wasn't interested in becoming someone I didn't respect. What I planned was exposure, the kind that doesn't rely on shouting or cruelty, the kind that simply turns the lights on and lets people see what's already there. The night arrived quietly, filled with familiar laughter and conversation, food on the table, glasses clinking, and for a moment it almost felt like the life I thought I had. But beneath that surface, I felt steady, grounded, and ready. When everyone was seated and the room settled into that comfortable buzz of shared history, I stood up slowly and told them I had something important to share, something about honesty, marriage, and respect. And the shift in the room was immediate, like the air itself had paused. Linda's smile wavered, then faded slowly as I connected my phone to the TV and displayed the messages she had sworn never existed, the words clear and undeniable, sitting there in silence for everyone to see. No yelling filled the room, no insults flew, no accusations needed to be spoken because the truth has a weight all its own. And as it settled into that space where lies had lived for so long, the room went completely quiet, not with shock alone but with understanding. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of control over my own story returning at last. Linda tried to speak. I could see it on her face before any sound came out, her mouth opening slightly, her chest rising like she was about to explain, to defend, to twist the story one last time. But the words failed her the same way honesty had failed her for months, maybe years. Nothing she could say in that moment would have mattered anyway, because the truth was already standing in the middle of the room, clear and undeniable, and for the first time she had no control over it. Eric wasn't there physically, but his presence felt loud, almost suffocating, like a ghost dragged into daylight where it didn't belong. And I could feel how uncomfortable it made everyone, how his name didn't need to be spoken for people to understand who he was and what he had done to our family. Our kids stared at their mother with expressions I will never forget, not anger at first, but confusion, deep hurt and disbelief, like the ground beneath them had shifted and they didn't know where to stand anymore. Seeing that pain in their eyes hurt me in a way nothing else had, because no matter what happened between Linda and me, they didn't deserve to have their sense of family shaken like that. Her sister started crying quietly, covering her mouth with her hand, shaking her head like she wished she could rewind time and erase what she was seeing. And I realized then that betrayal never belongs to just two people. It spreads. It stains everyone who trusted the image that was presented to them. As for me, I felt calm in a way that surprised even myself, not happy, not relieved, not angry, just finished, like a long, exhausting chapter of my life had finally reached its last page. I didn't feel the need to shout or insult her, because the truth had already done all the talking that needed to be done. I told them, slowly and clearly, that I wasn't sharing any of this for sympathy, that I wasn't looking for comfort or sides to be taken, because this wasn't about revenge or embarrassment. I told them I was sharing it because silence only protects betrayal, because pretending everything is fine only teaches people that lies have no consequences, and because I refused to carry shame that didn't belong to me. Linda finally gathered herself enough to stand up, her movements stiff and mechanical, like someone moving through a bad dream, and she didn't argue, didn't deny, didn't try to turn anyone against me, because for the first time she understood there was nowhere left to hide. She went upstairs, packed a suitcase quietly and walked back down with a face I barely recognized, a face stripped of confidence, stripped of control, stripped of the comfort she had grown used to. When she walked out the door that night, the house felt strangely still, not empty, but settled, like something heavy had finally been removed. The laugh I had heard in my bedroom, the one that haunted me, the one that echoed in my head for weeks, never came back, and it wasn't replaced by shouting or chaos or drama. It was replaced by something quieter and far more powerful: consequence. Divorce isn't easy, especially when you've spent decades building your life around someone, when your routines, your memories, your very identity is tied to the person who suddenly becomes a stranger in your own home. At 56, I felt every year, every ache, every wrinkle not as a mark of time alone, but as a reminder of how long I had invested in a life that wasn't entirely mine anymore. The hardest part wasn't packing up the house or dividing possessions. It was letting go of the illusion, the comforting lie that everything would be okay if I just stayed quiet, if I just forgave and pretended. But I learned quickly that living with disrespect is far heavier than starting over from scratch, and even though the path ahead was daunting, it carried with it a strange, liberating clarity. I downsized first, selling the house that had held both love and betrayal, the walls that had witnessed laughter and deceit, the rooms that had once been filled with quiet Sunday mornings and now echoed with absence. Moving into a smaller place, a space that was mine alone, felt like breathing for the first time in years, like my chest could finally expand without carrying the weight of someone else's lies. Every corner I unpacked, every object I touched, became a quiet assertion of ownership over my own life, a reclaiming of territory that had been metaphorically invaded for far too long. I rebuilt not just the walls around me, but the walls within me, carefully, thoughtfully, like a craftsman assembling something that had been broken into pieces, but could still be made beautiful. I reconnected with myself in ways I hadn't allowed for decades. Early morning walks where I could think without interruption, quiet evenings reading books I chose for myself, afternoons spent in the garage tinkering with old projects that had been abandoned when life got too busy or too painful. I discovered how peaceful a home can feel when it is honest, when the only voice you have to answer to is your own, when there is no pretense, no deception hiding in the corners. It was shocking in its simplicity. The lack of conflict, the lack of fear, the lack of constant tension allowed me to breathe in ways I had forgotten were possible. People think revenge has to be loud, dramatic, cinematic, with anger spilling over and chaos following. But sometimes the quietest revenge is walking away with your dignity intact, refusing to let betrayal define you, refusing to let someone else's choices dictate your peace. Months later, Linda reached out. Her messages were hesitant, careful, carrying a mix of apology and explanation. She cried on the phone, admitted her loneliness, blamed the emptiness she had created in her own life, tried to soften the damage she had done. For a moment, I listened with the old part of me that had once loved her, the part of me that had hoped for reconciliation or explanation or even a tiny spark of the life we had shared. But the man who had endured betrayal, who had watched the laugh that wasn't his own echo in his bedroom, was no longer the same man. I listened calmly, letting her words wash over me without reacting, without judging, without trying to fix what could not be fixed. And then I let it go. Because closure doesn't mean reopening the door, doesn't mean pretending the past never happened, doesn't mean inviting someone back into a life they once broke. Closure means understanding that your peace, your dignity, your life belong to you, and that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to walk forward without looking back. Starting over at 56 was not about erasing history or denying pain. It was about acknowledging the past, taking the lessons it offered, and choosing a future where I was the center of my own life again. It meant learning to trust myself, to rely on my own judgment, to rebuild my routines, my habits, my sense of worth from the ground up. The first morning in my new apartment, I made coffee in a kitchen that was smaller, quieter, but mine, and I realized I hadn't felt this kind of calm in decades. The sunlight fell through the window just so, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, unburdened by lies, unchained from deceit, finally free to become the man I had always been underneath it all. Betrayal changes a person in ways you don't fully understand until you've lived it, until you felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, and realized that the person you trusted most has been building a life of secrets while you were busy building a life with them. It doesn't destroy you if you refuse to let it. Destruction only comes when you hand over your peace, when you let anger and resentment shape your every thought. What it does, if you let it, is strip away illusions. It forces you to see people as they are, not as you hoped they'd be, not as you dreamed they could be if circumstances had been kinder or life had been simpler. That was a lesson I had to learn the hard way, staring at messages on a screen, listening to laughter that wasn't meant for me, feeling the emptiness of trust broken. I learned that love without respect is just habit, a routine of familiarity and comfort that feels like stability until the foundation crumbles. You can go through the motions for years, saying I love you and I trust you while ignoring the small betrayals, the hidden laughter, the secret messages, and eventually those small fissures widen into chasms. I learned that silence can be strength, not weakness, that choosing when to speak and when to hold your tongue can protect you in ways confrontation often cannot. It's the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, doesn't seek approval, doesn't demand recognition. It's quiet, patient, deliberate, and when used wisely, it can reshape a life that has been fractured by deception. I discovered that patience gave me clarity, that observation gave me power, that restraint gave me control over a situation that could have destroyed me if I'd reacted too soon. Every day, as I rebuilt my home and my routine, I felt that power growing, subtle at first, then undeniable, like a quiet current that guides a boat without anyone seeing the hand at the rudder. And I learned that starting over isn't failure. It isn't admitting defeat or weakness. It's courage, the kind that makes you face the unknown with steady steps, the kind that allows you to say goodbye to what you thought was permanent without losing your sense of self. At 56, I wasn't too old to start again. I wasn't too tired to hope, too worn to rebuild, or too broken to trust in my own ability to create a life I could be proud of. I was finally awake. Awake to the reality that respect matters more than comfort, that honesty matters more than loyalty without boundaries, and that self-worth is something you must protect at all costs. Betrayal taught me patience, discernment, and the quiet art of resilience. It taught me that people show who they truly are not through the moments they are good, but through the moments they are tempted to hide or deceive. And it taught me that the measure of a man isn't found in how much he suffers, but in how he responds when the suffering comes. I realized that the life I had lived up to that point, the routines, the sacrifices, the loyalty, were not wasted. They were lessons, building blocks for a stronger, wiser version of myself. Every ache, every long workday, every night spent worrying about bills or family, had been a rehearsal for the resilience I now owned. A resilience forged in quiet pain and refined in reflection. I learned that the laughter I once heard, the laughter that cut through the peace of my bedroom, no longer had power over me, because I had created a life where deceit could no longer enter unnoticed, a life where my dignity was a shield and my awareness was a sword. I learned that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or condoning, that letting go doesn't mean giving up, and that sometimes the best form of revenge is living well, living fully, and never letting betrayal define the rest of your story. I learned that respect and self-honor are far more valuable than any temporary comfort or companionship, and that boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are the pillars that keep you standing straight when life tries to knock you down. At 56, I looked back on the years that had been filled with quiet suffering, unnoticed sacrifices, and the illusions of a love that had been slowly eroded, and I realized something profound. The betrayal didn't take me. It refined me. It forced me to confront truths I might never have faced otherwise, to see the fragility of trust, the strength of patience, and the clarity that comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. I was awake, aware, and unshakable in ways I had never been before. Every morning, waking up in my own space, feeling the calm I had fought to regain, I understood that life is measured not by the wrongs inflicted upon us, but by the wisdom and courage we gather in response. Betrayal had tried to break me, but instead, it became the tool that shaped the man I was meant to be. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to understand, something I wish someone had sat me down and told me years ago when I was still confusing endurance with love, it's this simple truth. Never ignore your instincts just to keep the peace. Your instincts exist to protect you, not to sabotage your happiness, and when they whisper that something is wrong, they're rarely lying. I spent years pushing those feelings down, convincing myself that doubt was weakness, that questioning meant I wasn't loyal enough, that silence was the price of a stable life. What I didn't realize back then was that peace built on lies isn't peace at all. It's just quiet suffering, the kind that settles into your bones slowly until you forget what real peace feels like. I stayed calm, stayed patient, stayed loyal long after my instincts were trying to wake me up, and in doing so, I taught myself to live with discomfort instead of addressing it. That choice didn't make me noble or strong. It made me vulnerable, and it gave deception the space it needed to grow unchecked. Respecting yourself doesn't mean being loud or aggressive. It means being honest with yourself first, demanding truth not as a weapon, but as a boundary, and understanding that love without honesty is just a story you tell yourself to survive another day. When truth is denied, when lies become routine, walking away isn't failure, it's self-respect. And that was the hardest lesson for me to learn, because walking away meant letting go of a life I had invested decades into. A life built on memories, effort, and sacrifice. I heard a man laughing in my bedroom, a sound that shattered everything I thought I knew, and in that moment I felt broken in a way that words still struggled to capture. That laugh wasn't just a betrayal of marriage. It was a betrayal of trust, of time, of the man I believed myself to be. But what came after, the choice to face the truth instead of burying it, the choice to choose myself instead of clinging to familiarity, rebuilt me into someone stronger than I had ever been before. Strength didn't come from confrontation or revenge. It came from clarity, from refusing to lie to myself any longer, from accepting that love should never require you to abandon your dignity. I learned that self-respect is quiet but unbreakable, that walking away with your head held high carries more power than any argument ever could, and that rebuilding your life, no matter your age, is always possible when you stop living for someone else's approval. Choosing myself didn't erase the pain or the memories, but it transformed them into lessons instead of wounds, into reminders of how far I had come and how much I deserved better. The moral that saved me wasn't complicated or dramatic. It was simple and hard all at once. Trust yourself, honor your worth, and never sacrifice your peace for someone who is comfortable living a lie. That choice didn't just save my life as it was. It gave me the life I was meant to live, honest, grounded, and free.